or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, 1 minute past 4. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Ukraine says it's in the final stages of reclaiming the strategic city of Kherson from Russia. Ukrainian soldiers have been celebrating the retreat of Russian troops, waving the national flag in the region's capital. Russia says the withdrawal is complete. Over 30,000 of its soldiers crossed the Dnipro River to the eastern bank this morning, with reports many of them drowned. Despite the retreat, the Kremlin claims Kherson is still part of Russia. UK authorities and coastguards are preparing for a significant surge in small boats crossing the English Channel this weekend. Bad weather has stopped migrants from illegally reaching the coast for almost a fortnight. But GB News understands, with the weather expected to improve, crime groups from Albania are planning a mass launch of small boats from French beaches tomorrow. It would be the first large-scale arrival since the end of last month, when just over 14,000 people arrived in 32 small boats. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is warning there's a tough road ahead after new data shows the UK economy shrank between July and September. It contracted by 0.2% during the 3 months as the cost of living crisis deepened. Hunt says difficult decisions will be needed to restore confidence and economic stability, but that the British economy remains resilient. Last week, the Bank of England forecast a 2-year recession, which would be the longest on record.
Today's GDP numbers are incredibly concerning. They show that the economy has shrunk in the last 3 months, and indeed they show that we are now the only major G7 economy whose economy is still smaller than it was going into the COVID pandemic. So these series of crises are problems made in Downing Street, but it is ordinary working people here in Britain who are paying the price.
The Met Police says 58 people have been charged over the Just Stop Oil protest that shut parts of the M25 this week. Over the last 4 days, environmental activists blocked the motorway, forcing it to close in several places. A police officer was also injured during Wednesday's protests. Earlier today, the group said they will halt their demonstrations on the motorway for now. A security guard has admitted to spying for Russia whilst working at the British Embassy in Berlin. David Ballantyne-Smith has pleaded guilty at the Old Bailey to handing over secrets to Moscow. The 58-year-old was arrested by police in August last year after spying for nearly a year. The UK has marked Armistice Day with a 2-minute silence. Bells rang out across the country, including the recently restored Big Ben in London, ahead of the 2-minute silence to remember the war dead. A service was held at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire to pay tribute to all those who've served their country. Army veteran Robert Clark told GB News he'd be remembering all those involved in the armed forces, past and present.
We're incredibly grateful, I think, for the services, the parades, the role of the royal family, for example. This is obviously the first year King Charles is going to be heading the services on Sunday. And I think a lot of the armed forces community and the veterans are welcoming, as well as reflective of the passing of Her late Majesty the Queen, the role that she had with the armed forces.
A prolific online paedophile who exploited children as young as 7 has been jailed for 26 years. Jordan Croft abused girls online over a 2-year period before being caught by officers from the National Crime Agency. Croft forced his victims to become his sex slaves and blackmailed them into sending photos and videos performing sexual acts on themselves and others. 24 of his 26 victims were under the age of 18. And Heathrow Airport has said it won't be limiting passenger numbers this festive season as it gears up for its biggest Christmas in 3 years. The West London Airport had 50 million passengers pass through its doors so far this year, almost 75% of pre-pandemic levels. Heathrow says a passenger cap won't be needed as a good plan is in place ahead of the Christmas peak. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's return to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, when I heard that Great Britain must pay reparations for damage caused by climate change, I laughed out loud. Surely nobody in their right mind would entertain this. Really? I mean, this was the latest in ridiculous demands at COP27, the thing that Rishi U-turned on when he heard that his mate Boris was going. Britain must pay reparations for climate damage.
Loss and damage needs to be part of the core agenda of COP27. It is the duty and responsibility of Global North to understand our difficulties and our plight.
Whereas we acknowledge and are thankful that, all parties would have eventually coalesced around the fact that loss and damage is absolutely required.
And we expect the largest emitters to take responsibility and to do their part in loss and damage and mitigation and adaptation.
Wealthy nations like the UK and Ireland stepping up on their climate finance commitments to help low-income countries that are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis.
Just to be clear, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but to be clear, a Labour
Absolutely,
government
it's about
would
supporting
give that
poorer
money.
countries, completely right. And let me just say, it's morally right, Laura, but it's also in our self-interest too.
Instead of telling the world where to get off and listing a string of the benefits the UK have brought to the world, like the steam engine, the spinning jenny, the locomotive and the first electrical telegraph communications, or pointing out that China has pumped out more CO2 in the past few years than Britain during the entire Industrial Revolution, and that if they wanted to go down this route, perhaps they should ask China for reparations after bringing the world COVID and then charging it for PPE. But do they dare? Of course not. Instead, this is what Rishi had to say.
The pandemic all but broke the global economy. And before coming here today, I spent last week working on the difficult decisions needed to ensure confidence and economic stability in my own country. But I can tell you today that the United Kingdom is delivering on our commitment of £11.6 billion. And as part of this, we will now triple our funding on adaptation to £1.5 billion by 2025.
I mean, the world has lost respect for the disunited kingdom, a country which has had 5 leaders in the space of 6 years and 7 Home Secretaries, a country whose politicians deposed of a democratically elected leader over cake, another within 45 days to install a puppet whose strings appear to be being pulled by the markets instead of the people of this country who didn't actually vote for him. This once great union of nations is being pulled apart by the ego of our politicians. Nicola Sturgeon with her one agenda, to break up the union, as my mother says. Northern Ireland and Stormont, who will not assemble. And then Wales, led by mask mandate mad Mark Drakeford. Take migration. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, called the illegal crossings an invasion of our southern coast, which is apparently costing us around about 7 million a day. Instead of seeing this as a threat to national security, our politicians from both parties were attacking the use of the word invasion, which it is, by the way. She's right. They simply do not want to see the problem because that means that they will have to do something about it, and that may make them unpopular to the people that they're trying to please. Ego. So instead, they do nothing but raise taxes on us to pay for it and pick on words. Even the Prime Minister of Albania has had a pop at the UK.
Britain was a role model in this, and now is becoming I don't know, like a madhouse.
I suspect after seeing how pathetic internal wrangling is destroying any chance we have of sending illegal migrants back and securing our borders, he thought he might as well get his 2 pennies worth. But expecting us to pay reparations for climate damage is absolutely ridiculous. Great Britain is being bullied on the world stage because our politicians have showed themselves to be spineless, swaying and buckling to satisfy their egos and their need to stay in power at all costs. The once great collectivism where politicians would unite for the good of this nation has been replaced with fragile, pathetic egotism trapped in myopic bubbles of power. I just had to get that off my chest. Right, before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? His controversial arrival on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here has left some contestants in tears. So angry are they with the Tory MP and ex-Health Secretary over his behaviour during the COVID crisis. His decision to enter the jungle has also come under fire from the public and politicians. But Hancock has also won some plaudits from the way that he's thrown himself into the Bush-Tucker trials. So I'm asking, can he turn public opinion around? What's your thought? Football legend and ex-jungle campmate John Fashanu and former Tory Minister Anne Whittaker will be battling it out later on. Then at 4:50 in Climate Watch, I'll have the latest on COP27. I'll be speaking to a political commentator live at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where the conference is underway. US President Joe Biden has been addressing world leaders today, calling on countries to take urgent action on climate change and telling world leaders the eyes of history will be upon them. Then, every Friday at 5, I put the spotlight on a particular guest or subject matter in Friday Focus. And the Royal College of Nurses, or the RCN, has voted to move ahead with strike action after balloting its 300,000 members over a pay dispute. Now, this all comes as record numbers of patients await operations following the pandemic. I'll be looking into why nurses are being paid so poorly and asking whether it's time to restructure the NHS. That's all on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, well, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster, journalist and entrepreneur. I always like to chuck that in. Danny Kelly. It puts a big smile on his face when I do that. Have you noticed it, Christine?
Yeah, he loves it.
Well, look, it's about time that my journalistic recognition was broadcast regularly on this fabulous channel, the People's Channel.
Yes, but being an entrepreneur means you're part of the backbone of this country, so I salute you.
And a strong old backbone it is.
And a strong old...
It has to be.
Like a Tyrannosaurus
We
Rex.
need more entrepreneurs like you.
Thank you, Christine.
So, Christine, I'm going to start with you. OK, so reparations for climate damage.
I know. It really is completely mind-boggling. I mean, most of the people who were asking for this wouldn't even be here if it hadn't been for the Industrial Revolution. I mean, we doubled the consequences of it. We're doubling life expectancy and saving people from sort of agrarian servitude. You mentioned this briefly, but in the last 8 years, China has pumped out more emissions than we have since 1750. So what on earth are they talking about? And let's not even look at the other... It's all about making other countries seem like victims, and it's brought a sort of rather toxic element into all this. But let's look at all the positive sides of the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
You mentioned them, you know, the steam engine, tarmac academy, railways, etc., etc. And I would just like to say 3 words to the people who are demanding that we pay for these so-called terrible emissions. James Berners-Lee. Who gave the world the World Wide Web? Britain. For nothing. He just said, there you are, his presence. So if we're going to have this balance sheet of what we owe and what, et cetera, I think actually the balance is in our favour. And why should we pay reparations to countries like China and Pakistan, for example, who've got their own nuclear programme?
Well, could you imagine if...
It's just ridiculous.
But could you imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and you were asking some of these countries to pay reparations to the UK? It just simply wouldn't happen. It's a nonsensical proposition to begin with, but I suspect we have made ourselves look weak. The politicians have behaved in such a manner that the world is laughing at us, so they're just seeing what they can get out of us. Danny?
36,000 people have flown to Egypt, 400 private jets. The hypocrisy is gut-wrenchingly stinking. It's unbelievable, 400 private jets. Just to get back to the reparation, a lot of people are talking about Pakistan, the reparation. OK, now, we give them £300 million a year in foreign aid. How much more do you want to bleed us dry? No. They've got a space programme. They've got a nuclear programme. We give them £300 million a year. Back in 1950, they had a more severe flood that cost people even more lives. And also, I wasn't aware of this. I've been looking at this story. When Pakistan was established in 1947, 38% of the land was forest. 33% has been removed through deforestation, so when it rains, they don't have the trees to help absorb all the rainwater. They are the masters of their own downfall, and they want us to give them more dough. It's ridiculous.
But how weak is it that if I were the Prime Minister, somebody said that, I probably would laugh out loud first with teeth, but then I would have to point out the things that we have done, and I wouldn't be saying I'm trebling the aid or I'm doing this or doing that. How weak are they coming across? Why are they buckling in this manner? Well,
Rishi shouldn't even be there, should he? He made the right decision when he said he wasn't going to go, and then he buckled and U-turned and said, oh, I think I better go. I'll tell you what was lovely was his love-in with Emmanuel Macron is actually quite hideous to see. At least Macron has now found a world leader who's shorter than him, so he's rather pleased. But it's pretty grim the way you can see those two bonding rather too closely together.
Well, it'll help with the channel, though.
Well, it might do.
But Nana, these environmental zealots, these loonies like Just Stop Oil, who thankfully have just stopped protesting a moratorium, which we're all grateful for, they are hanging on. The only thing they have, when someone quite logically and understandably says, well, the UK is only responsible for 1%, then their argument against that, because that 1% is an incredibly strong argument, their argument is, well, you gave the world the Industrial Revolution. You're the ones, we're the ones responsible for people burning coal all around the world. And that needs to be argued down.
Well, what about COVID, though? I mean, you know, as far as we know, and with all the records that we have at the moment, we see that the majority it came from China. That's where it looks like... Well, that's what I
Reparations for us.
So right. Because when I saw that happen, I thought, well, what's going to happen? What about the fact that all these countries that had to lock down their economies, we all literally went bankrupt, and they should be... I was initially at the time thinking that they should be sued or something for that, because they didn't give us all the information at the beginning as well. It wasn't as easy. You know, it took time, and that time cost lives and money. Why is nobody going and asking China?
Well, all the delay was because they denied it, wasn't it? Well, then they went on and made millions and millions and millions out of selling us all these ridiculous masks and PPE equipment. The whole thing is a complete nonsense, and Rishi Sunak shouldn't have given it a second's credence.
But also geopolitics, you need to understand that, yes, OK, let's just assume that it didn't come from a wet market. Let's just say it came from a... No, all right, well, either way, it was man-made or a wet market. Either way, it came from China. OK, it doesn't matter.
It came from China.
Geopolitically, then politicians are thinking of the bigger picture about whether to go after China for trillions and trillions of US dollars or British pounds, because you need to still have a diplomatic relationship.
Well, the reason they're doing that is because they're all buying from China as well. So if they did that and China said, oh, we'll cut you off, then we're all finished, aren't we? The reason why China's carbon emissions are so high is to supply the rest of the world. OK, so that's one of the big reasons.
We export the guilt, don't we?
That's right. So we've exported our guilt. But having said that, we're all culpable. So there should be nobody paying reparations to anybody, because we actually, from what we have done, we're probably a net benefit, as opposed to the other way around.
And we've exported our guilt because we say, we don't make these things here, but we buy them from China. And what sort of labour conditions exist in China? Let's not call it slave labour, but it might not be 100% happily cooperative labour, but we all happily buy all our stuff from there. And I've got the figures here. I mean, in cumulative emissions since 1750, I mean, now we have to go back to the Industrial Revolution, let's do it. The USA is top with 417 billion tonnes. China is second, 235. Russia, 115. Germany, 92. We come in fifth at 78 billion tonnes. We're fifth. So if anybody's got to make reparations, I mean, let's start at the top. Let's start at the USA, making reparations to us.
Well, for some odd reason...
The whole thing is a nonsense
it will come back
stilts.
to us, because didn't they send our people to America anyway, so the Americans are British. So it's all our fault. Our fault.
Of course it's all our fault.
Let's go all the way back to Africa. Then I suppose it's my fault. It's ridiculous. Well, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts as ever. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at GBNews. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, still to come, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? What do you think? I've been watching The Jungle. You may have been watching it as well. Is he doing a good job? So for the debate, I'm asking, what do you think? Can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? The ex-Health Secretary's decision to enter The Jungle has come under fire. Lots of people not happy about it. Boy George was in tears, wasn't he, with regards to it? He also won some plaudits today because he's been quite brave. He's got all the stars when it was needed. Football legend John Fashanu and former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe will be giving their take on the matter. That's on the way. Send me your thoughts as ever. You know the coup, or tweet me at GB News. There's a poll up right now asking that very question. Do you think he can redeem himself? Cast your vote now. We'll be back.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
It's coming up to 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before the break, we were discussing Sunak and COP27. Let's see what you've been saying. Paul says, if we didn't build our economy and industry, then all those countries wouldn't have got aid from us. We keep giving, they keep taking, and they never do anything about the lack of water, poverty in their own countries. Now, this is, of course, with response to whether they should be allowed to have reparations from the UK for climate damage. Kate says, as with foreign aid, you can bet most of the money will be trousered by corrupt bureaucrats and politicians, in my opinion. The world should thank us for the Industrial Revolution. Without these scientific advances, we made billions of people wouldn't be alive today. Absolutely, I'm with you there. Keep your thoughts coming. It's good to hear. You're so sensible, you know. Right, it is time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, we should be the politicians. What do you think? Can Matt Hancock, another one of these politicians, redeem himself in the eyes of the public? Now, he was the former health secretary. He's been doing a lot on the jungle this week, and his decision to appear on the show not only resulted in him losing the Conservative Party whip, suspended, but sparked a major backlash from across the political spectrum. His presence in the camp has also created unease amongst his fellow contestants, with TV presenter Scarlett Douglas describing his breaking the COVID rules as a slap in the face to the public. That's as singer boy George was seen to be visibly upset when discussing Hancock's presence on the show because his mother almost died during the pandemic. But Hancock has won some plaudits for the way he's conducted himself. I mean, I have to be honest, I watched the first one and I was in hysterics. He won all the Bush Tucker trials. He got 11 stars yesterday. And a lot of people, his campmates, are cheering him on. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? I'm joined in the studio by TV presenter John Fashioner, who appeared on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here back in 2003. John.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Good to
Once
see you.
again.
Yeah, excellent to see you. So I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Have you been watching part of it?
Oh, yes, I have. I've been watching all of it.
Yeah.
It's not easy,
no,
as everybody knows, and
yeah.
I certainly know, that's for sure.
What was the worst bit of it for you?
You know, Nana, the worst bit has got to be having a full snake put round your body, right the way round you, and then you have a bag over your head,
right,
and you have to manage it. And when you say it's enough, they'll take the snake off. But if you don't, and you go the whole way, wow, you win the competition.
So you've got a set time to have
yes,
the thing on you?
Yes.
And it's a boa constrictor, I should imagine?
Yeah, it was, yes.
Or maybe it wasn't, but they told you that. You might
they
not
told
know
me
the
that.
difference.
Well, any snake, snake is a snake. Yeah.
So what do you think of Matt's performance yesterday? He got 11 stars. I mean,
you know, for heaven's sake, he was great. I mean, that's what life is all about. How you live your life. This is what we were talking about the last time I was on the show. It's up to you. As long as you adhere to the rules and the regulations, leave him alone.
Well, speaking of rules and regulations, I mean, he broke them, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He certainly did.
So that's one of the things people are annoyed about him. Also, the release of people older people from hospitals to care homes and things like that during the pandemic. There are a few other things he did that people weren't happy with. I mean, does that reflect on him now? In your view, does that stick with you?
Well, Nana, let's talk about some of the good things he's done as well. I mean, it's very well we can all come and say, this is what he's done. He's done A, B, C, D. But there were good things he did as well. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stayed in his position as long as he has.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I mean, but I mean, a lot of the things he did. So there was a PPE shortage. Apparently, he didn't get enough PPE, and there was a shortage even before the pandemic. Yeah. So people blame him for that as well.
Well, they're going to blame him for that. I mean, if he hadn't have done what he did, and I think he put his hand up and he said he was wrong. He said he was wrong, and we all know he was wrong what he did. Everybody agrees with that. But now to start putting everything on him, putting the muck on him on here and this, he did that, he did this. But there were some good things he did. Otherwise, he would not have stayed there, Nana, for so long.
It's true. I mean, the procurement of the vaccines, for example, he took gambles on things that we weren't sure were going to work.
Yeah, and the public were quite comfortable with him at those period of times. If this hadn't have been exposed, then possibly he'd be in his same position, still doing the same, and everybody would be praising him.
He's caught on camera. He likes the cameras, does our Matt. Well, I'm also joined by former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe, who once famously partnered Anton de Beck on Strictly Come Dancing. So you've done reality stuff yourself, Anne. I do recall watching you on that as well. But Anne, what do you make of this? So he's had the Conservative whip suspended, of course, from him. In your view, has he made a mistake getting involved in this show?
Well, I don't think he should be there for two reasons. The first is he cannot vote while he's in the jungle, and Parliament is in session. It's not in recess. I might take a different attitude if it were recess. And the second thing is constituents' emergencies. Now, I know he's able to be contacted if there's a real emergency in the constituency. But what people don't appreciate is that for individual constituents, what they're contacting their MP about is an emergency to them. And he can't be dealing with every single one. So for that reason, I don't think he should be doing it. But I watched the first one. I thought the whole show was remarkably childish. I thought Ant and Dec are back in the kindergarten. And Matt and Sean Walsh appeared to spend the entire entry into the jungle laughing themselves silly, like very young Boy Scouts. But he's done the things he was asked to do. He got the stars. You know, he led the way when he and Sean had to go down into the burrow. He obviously can laugh at himself. And although I think it is very silly and very childish and that he shouldn't be there, I wouldn't be surprised if the public started to turn. And I'll give you one reason for that. And I was speaking to, I was doing a speaking engagement last night and I was asked about this. And I said, well, the one thing he doesn't deserve is for the press to be distorting absolutely everything. I mean, I read an account the next day that he'd squealed, he'd screamed. He didn't do any of those things. He said, yuck, yeah. But he didn't. He wasn't howling with fear or anything like that. And I think if the press deliberately set out to humiliate him and the public see something very different on their screens, they could just turn in his favour. I would have put absolutely nothing on that at the beginning of all of this, but now I do wonder if he might just pull it off.
I have a feeling he will pull it off. Let's bring John back in as well, because I noticed that, John, you were shaking your head at something that Anne said earlier with regard to...
Well, I was surprised because Anne was a little bit strong. I mean, the whole emphasis on the particular show is to make people laugh. It's supposed to be something which is enjoyable. It's for everybody to go, wow, can he do that? You know, I was on the show and nothing was fake at all. Everything was real, what you were seeing. So that's really all. But I understand what Anne's saying.
Yeah, I mean, Anne, the premise of the show is supposed to be, in this awful cost of living crisis, actually, to be fair, he should really be dealing with that. But Anne also pointed out that, you know, the House is sitting and he should be in there. It's not like a recess or anything.
Correct.
What's your view on that, John?
Oh, no, correct, 100%. I think that he knows himself that whatever he's done now, he's certainly not going to come back. And I don't think that he's got to actually assess where is he going to come back to when he does come back. Because there's very few places are going to accept him back for what he's done.
Well, I think he's going to be on about at least $1 million a year after this, so I don't think he needs to worry about it. And do you think that the reason he did this is because he thinks the Conservatives are toast in the next election?
I think he may well think he is toast, and he may well think that, you know, he hasn't got a political future in front of him, and therefore he's going to build something for when he stands down, if he's going to stand down. But I don't know. We can all speculate on his motives. I mean, it might be something as basic as the money, given that he's got a divorce and, you know, kids to look after and fund. I don't know. I don't know anything about his personal reasoning. And so that is the only answer I can give you. He may be building another career.
Do you think that there should be a rule that says MPs can't do these reality shows whilst they're an MP? Do you think that would be...
I do think there should be a rule that you can't be absent without the permission of the Chief Whip, and indeed there is that. It may not be written down, but I mean it's an understood rule. You get permission if you have to be absent for any reason, for any length of time. And Nadine Dorries lost the whip for precisely the same reason. She went into the jungle, but then she ended up in the cabinet. So maybe Matt's reasoning is that if he comes out of this very popular, maybe he'll also end up back in the cabinet. So far from thinking about standing down, he may think about progressing.
Sorry, Anne, may I ask a straight question? If you had the opportunity to go, would you say yes and do it? Grandchildren, you've got kids, you've got people who love you.
Anne will do it.
Listen, I was asked to do Strictly every single year for 5 years, and I refused while I was an MP. I agreed to do it only when I had actually retired because of the duty of time, and also, let's not forget it, although it's very tempting to in this day and age, there's also a duty of dignity. You owe that to the office of an MP.
Well, Anne Widdecombe, thank you so much for joining us. Really good to talk to you, Anne. Thank you so much. And John, I'm going to come back finally to John then on this one. John, so I'm going to come back to you finally on this. I want to ask you then, with regard to this, do you then think that this will change people's perception of him? Because a lot of people feel very negative about it.
I think there are a lot of people who are negative about him. I think that what Anne is saying is that she's lessening the actual show itself. I think the show should be taken in good value and the fact that it's very short and simple. I think that he's going to come back a different person.
Yeah.
He must do. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is a good opportunity for him. And if he knows he's planned already another life for himself, and he's going to continue that way.
Well, all good. Thank you very much, John. It's always
Thank you,
good
Nana.
to see you. That is the fabulous John Fashanu, and also I was speaking to Anne Widdecombe earlier as well. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue with our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? We'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Then, at 5 o'clock, it's time for Friday Focus. The Royal College of Nurses has voted to move ahead with strike action after balloting its 300,000 members over a pay dispute. Now, this all comes as record numbers of patients await operations following the pandemic. I'll be looking into why nurses are being paid so poorly and also asking whether it's time to restructure the NHS. All of that after your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. It's 4:34. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Ukraine says it's in the final stages of reclaiming the city of Kherson from Russia. Ukrainian soldiers have been celebrating the retreat of Russian troops, waving the national flag in the region's capital. Russia says the withdrawal is complete. Its soldiers crossed the Dnipro River to the eastern bank this morning, with reports many of them drowned. Despite the retreat, the Kremlin claims Kherson is still part of Russia. UK authorities and coastguards are preparing for a significant surge in small boat crossings through the English Channel this weekend. GB News has seen evidence of up to 6,000 migrants waiting to cross near the northern coast of France. With the weather improving, we understand crime groups from Albania are planning a mass launch of small boats from tomorrow. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt's warning there's a tough road ahead, saying difficult decisions will be needed to restore confidence and economic stability. His comments come as the latest official figures show the UK economy contracted by 0.2% between July and September. The data from the Office for National Statistics follows the Bank of England's warning last week that the UK may be heading for a two-year recession. The Met Police says 58 people have been charged over the Just Stop Oil protest that shut parts of the M25 this week. Over the last 4 days, environmental activists blocked the motorway, forcing it to close in several places. A police officer was also injured during Wednesday's protest. Earlier today, the group said they will halt their demonstrations on the motorway for now. And a security guard has admitted to spying for Russia whilst working at the British Embassy in Berlin. David Ballantyne-Smith has pleaded guilty at the Old Bailey to handing over secrets to Moscow. The 58-year-old was arrested by police in August last year after spying for nearly a year. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip
of the iceberg. And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. This is GB News live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's fast approaching 40 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. And don't forget, you can also download the GB News app where you can check out everything that we have here on the channel. But now it's time for our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? The former Health Secretary finally entered I'm a Celebrity in the Jungle this week. Now, the decision resulted in him losing the Conservative Party whip, sparking a major backlash from the public and politicians. His fellow contestants have also spoken of their unease of Hancock's presence in the camp, but he's winning hearts and minds for the way he's conducting himself, especially during the Bush Tucker trials. He responded very well last night when he got 11 stars. But what do you think? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? And in fact, should politicians even be allowed to be doing reality shows whilst they're actually sitting MPs? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton and also broadcaster, journalist and entrepreneur Danny Kelly. Twice in a row you've been called it.
I tell you what, I'm on a run of good form.
Well, I've got to start with Christina, because she's been in the jungle, and I remember the one that you were on as well. There was loads of shenanigans on your one.
I was on the very first one, and I feel rather smug being a pioneer. Matt Hancock, whatever you think of Matt Hancock, whatever views you have of him, and I think the people who really suffered under COVID, for all the reasons we know, have every right to be very angry with him. But whatever you think about him, he shouldn't be there. He's got a full-time, very well-paid job, paid for by the taxpayer, and that job does not consist of him being the other side of the world. He should be between Westminster and his constituency, or all points in between. So he shouldn't be there in the first place. And he says, I want to go in to, first of all, so that people can see politicians are sort of real. And I mean, what rubbish. He's going in for £400,000. I did it for the money. Most people do it for the money. Nothing like 400,000. So why isn't he honest about that? He then says, I want to talk about dyslexia. Has he watched the show?
He hasn't mentioned it once, has he?
Well, he may have done, because it's all in the editing. He may have done. But the idea that ITV are going to give prime-time television to his thoughts on dyslexia, but he can reinvent himself. By the way, I wrote this down. You said he's winning hearts and minds. I actually take issue with that. I don't think he's winning any hearts and any minds. I think he is winning some respect for the way he does the trials. And I'm sure he'll do all the trials, but he will be annoying some of the other campmates. They don't want to do the eating trial. But I mean, Mike Tindall, for example, is longing to do some trials. He's a big, tough guy. He would love to do them.
I hope he does get to do them.
But, you know, he can change things around, because just very quickly, when I went into the jungle, I was not incredibly popular. I'd been painted by the media as this pretty frightful woman. And I did. People suddenly thought, my goodness, she's a human being. We haven't realised that. And, you know, she's quite nice. She's fun. She's got a sense of humour. She gets on with other people. She's kind to wild animals. And my stock just literally went... It was quite extraordinary. And it was the best thing I ever did. Really? Now, whether Matt Hancock can do... I didn't go in to do that. It never crossed my mind. And if he is going in to do that, I don't think it'll make a scrap of difference. He just shouldn't be there.
How can anybody not think Christine is lovely? She's so nice.
Cast your mind back.
Kind to wild animals. Do you know, she's always been friendly to me. I disagree with you. I'm made up he's in there. And I normally agree with what Anne Widdecombe says, but I think she's still in this little Westminster bubble, even though she's long retired from politics.
Do you think?
I do, because what
she is.
Well, forgive me, let me qualify this, because I'm a fan of hers. What I sort of took exception to was when she said the dignity of the position of Parliament. I'm paraphrasing. The average man and woman, the viewers of celebrity don't give a damn about this dignity for the position of Parliament. They don't care.
No.
I think he's capable of winning. I really do. I'm delighted. Well, I do. The bookmakers are offering 12-1 on him at the moment. I think that there's an element of atonement. He's looking for atonement. Yes, he's after the £400,000. There's so much hypocrisy and double standards because Boy George was sentenced to prison for keeping a guy against his will and assaulting him during a cocaine, and this is on the record, a cocaine-fuelled battery charge, yeah? Chris Moyles, and again, this is on the record, so please don't worry, Chris Moyles had to apologise for avoiding £400,000 worth of tax to go into the coffers of the Inland Revenue. One of the other contestants has been done for drink driving. Ant McPartlin's been done for drink driving.
Yeah, but that's not the point. They're not MPs.
So not the point. They're not MPs. They don't.
I don't think that matters.
Job. Let's take Boy George for a start, because possibly his misdemeanours were the worst. He has served his time. I mean, there is such a thing as forgiveness. He's been to...
Forgive Matt Hancock, then.
But he shouldn't be there.
I disagree.
It's not to do with any of that. He shouldn't be there.
Well,
he has a very well-paid job, and he should be... Look here, I cut out this little thing. There is something on his website. Listen to this. This is from Matt Hancock to his West Suffolk constituents. I want to hear your thoughts on the cancellation of bus routes 11 and 12. He's 10,000 miles
but that
away.
just, can I just say, that just shows, that just illustrates why he's over there. Because if that's all he's got to worry about, bus routes 11 and 12...
No. That's just been taken out.
If that is the amount of concern, the damn bus routes going through Suffolk...
It's an insult to his constituents, first of all. It's an insult to the taxpayers and...
So what about Boris Johnson, who went to Antigua for a couple of weeks?
I don't think he should have gone. When Parliament is sitting, their job is Westminster and their constituency. Their job is not... No, Boris should never have gone. Recess is different. They have masses of recess when they can do these things. If the jungle was happening during the recess, fine. Never, to hell with the dignity of MPs.
Yeah.
But no, they shouldn't go off on holiday. They get masses of holiday.
Please.
OK, so what about, then what would you say? Because you're saying all this stuff about Matt Hancock. What about track and trace? A lot of people said that contracts seem to be going to people that seem to know the Conservative Party. What about the PPE? He didn't plan properly for the PPE. People are saying that people who had COVID was discharged into care homes, which meant lots of people died. What would you say about that? That was a care home scandal.
He made some terrible decisions.
But these are the reasons why people are not happy with him being there.
So we can forgive Boy George. He's paid his price. But we can't forgive Matt Hancock for making terrible decisions.
But take into context that lots of people died as a result, and also take into context that he's actually a working MP right now.
That's the point. That's the key point.
Well, that's where I don't think it matters, but I know that you do think it matters. Going back to the track and trace or the test and trace, whatever, don't forget, he was taking guidance from some of the biggest medical brains. He was taking advice.
If only.
No, I know, but he was taking advice unprecedented times. And Nana, your first curveball, I'll answer that.
What about the 1% pay rise to the nurses then, after all this whole thing that, we were clapping for them as well? He would have been part of that too.
Well, to answer your curveball about him giving to Tory friends the big contracts, say, for example, there was an emergency and you needed a car. You'd ring me up and say, Dan, I need a car.
I'm not saying what side I stand on.
You would?
No, but what I'm saying is I actually think he's doing a great job in the jungle, but I'm just putting it out there that other people might disagree with you.
I agree. Other people hate him because of those mistakes. All I'm saying is that he, without the first sin, cast the first stone. That's all I'm saying.
OK.
I think, actually, what we will find is that the campmates, they've had their initial shock and horror that he was there and total disbelief, and they've all had their talks to him and to each other about why they don't think he should be there. But I think, I feel very envious looking at those scenes. I really do. I would love to be back in camp. I so enjoyed it. Well...
How much? May I ask how much you got?
No, it was a very long time ago. It was 20 years ago. But I can already see that their attitude is slightly changing. He's just become... You're all in it together, as it were. I think he may find that he gets on rather better with his campmates than might originally appear. But he shouldn't be there.
He shouldn't be there, says Christine. Well, this show's nothing without you and your views. What do you think? Let's welcome our Great British Voice on here. Their opportunity to tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we head to? Where should we go to?
Grimsby.
Sorry, Grimsby.
That's a fishing port.
Let's go to Grimsby. It's not grim because Alan McNeely is there. Al, can we call you Al? It might be quite grim in Grimsby. Al, what do you think then? Come on, Matt Hancock, he's in the jungle. Should he be there?
Well, at this point in time, I'd agree with Christy. No, he shouldn't. He's a working MP, Parliament sitting. He wanted to do that in recess, then that's up to him. No problem with that. But he shouldn't be doing it when he's actually got a paid job to be at. Will it redeem him? Well, that's a bit of a laugh. There's so many people have a lot against Hancock, and he made a huge amount of mistakes, very damaging mistakes. So I think is he doing it for the money? Yes. Is he doing it for a new career? Probably yes, because when the COVID inquiry comes along and his role that he played in that becomes clearer, his political career is probably finished. It might up his esteem, as Christine says, and suddenly make him more appealing to people. He's looking for a new career and crack on, Matt, but I don't think his constituents would be very happy about it.
Well, he's sorting out the bus routes. What's bus 11 and something else, so that's all he's got to worry about. That's all good. Alan, thank you very much, as ever. Lovely to talk to you. That's Alan McNeely there in Grimsby. He's our great British voice. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, Climate Watch. I'll be speaking to a political commentator live at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where the conference COP27 is underway. And US President Joe Biden addresses world leaders, calling countries to take urgent action on climate change. That's after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
Probably telling.
You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Welcome on board if you've just joined me. Where have you been? Now, we were talking a lot earlier, and let's see what you've been saying. We were discussing the controversy surrounding Matt Hancock, the former health secretary, appearing on I'm a Celebrity. Let's see what you've been saying. Now, June says, it's a hard one. I think he did only what he was told to do by Boris. You think? Yeah, potentially, but Boris doesn't really hold all the cards and everything. Mark says, in my eyes, Matt Hancock has nothing to redeem himself for. Interesting. Do you not think? I'm kind of with you, if I'm honest. I don't blame him for everything. Vaughan says, I don't understand why so many people are focused on Matt Hancock. Let him have his fun in the jungle. It's rumble in the jungle. Interesting, we'll see. Right, but it's now time for Climate Watch, where we like to take a look at what's happening in the world of climate. It's watch hour. This is watch time, basically, so sometimes it's health watch. But this time, top of the agenda is the climate. And, of course, COP27, the summit is taking place in Egypt. US President Joe Biden addressed the summit earlier this afternoon, in which he called on countries to act faster on climate change. He told the world leaders to take the future in their hands. He struck a similar chord to Rishi Sunak, or what did he call him last time?
Rashuni Sunak.
Rishi Sunak.
Rashi Sunak.
He mangled it wonderfully.
He did a very good job on that. Who earlier in the week, Rishi earlier in the week urged leaders to move faster on renewable energy and added that the war in Ukraine emphasised the need for tougher action on climate change. Now, Biden has pledged $100 million in support for climate adaptation, which actually probably wouldn't go that far, and promising to reach emission reduction targets by 2030. Here's a clip.
Climate crisis is about human security, economic security, environmental security, national security, and the very life of the planet. The United States of America will meet our emissions targets by 2030.
Now, of course, this all comes as the number of delegates with links to fossil fuels at the summit has jumped 25% from last year, raising fears among climate activists that oil and gas companies will shape the debate away from renewables. So to discuss this, I'm joined by the Director of Corporate Affairs at international communications firm Hume Brophy, Andy Williams. Andy, thank you very much for joining me. So are you currently in Sharm el-Sheikh now?
Yeah, I am. I've been here since Sunday, so it's day 6. It's kind of taking its toll now. Quite a grueling few days, but a very rewarding few days. And I think, it's a privilege to be here and see that, COP is often characterised as a bit of a talking shop. And what I've seen here on the ground is practical action being taken, discussed and agreed by world leaders and by the businesses and the companies who are going to drive this agenda forward. It's not just about governments, it's about the whole economy and driving a net zero transition.
But you say that, but they all flew there. They flew there in private jets, and I'm sure it's all quite lavish. Is it quite lavish out there? Does it look like they've got 5-star hotels and everyone's having a bit of a knees up?
No, it's definitely not a knees up. I mean, look, to address your point directly, of course people have flown here. Let's not pretend they haven't. It's important we'll get together in person to have these conversations and to make sure the practical action is being taken. I think it's interesting, actually, that the same people who are criticising people for flying here and having in-person meetings are the same people who are saying we need to be in the office and have face-to-face meetings all the time. So, look, I think it's obviously not ideal that we have to fly halfway across the world to come to these summits, but it's a necessary evil. And I think it's great to see so many people here addressing head-on a really important issue.
Well, maybe it's because those same people probably might not subscribe to the notion of the CO2 thing. A lot of people thinking that perhaps CO2 isn't the main culprit for climate change. There are other things going on, and perhaps we should be addressing those things too. And a lot of people see all of this as a bit of a talking shop and a bit of a money spinner. So, for example, electric cars costing a fortune, all these things they're saying we should change to, whilst it just feels a bit hypocritical. In your view, because you said you're saying about it's a good everyone's seeing people face to face, were you there at COP26?
As it happens, no, I wasn't. I'm here supporting a couple of my clients who are here this year. My colleagues were at COP26 supporting other clients last year. But I think the point is that it is about practical action being taken, as I say, and. Really, look, the climate crisis is a global crisis by definition. Climate change, it doesn't recognise borders. It affects our entire planet, including the UK. And I think it's time that we stopped talking about climate change as a great cost, and we look at it more as something that we need to address, that we have no choice but to address, and that's going to become more expensive every year that we put off action, which is why every year you hear that COP is increasingly important, and it is, because action has to be taken. We don't have a choice.
I mean, look, a lot of people are dubious about this, though, because nothing seems to be happening, like a lot of impressive talk about projects. What's your view on the reparations thing? Because earlier they were saying that reparations, the United Kingdom should be paying reparations for climate damage What's your thought on that?
So loss and damage has been one of the major themes of this COP. Hugely widely discussed. Everywhere I go, I hear it being discussed. I think it's a complicated debate, right? So I don't think it's as simple as just saying, let's have all of the rich countries pool their money into a fund for less well-developed countries to take and to fund projects. I think it's more complicated than that. But I do think there is a role for richer, wealthier countries who have the means to support countries in South Asia and Africa who are experiencing the most acute effects of climate change, and supporting them to adapt their climate and to mitigate climate change, because they often can't afford it. And at the end of the day, it's our planet, it's one planet that we all have to protect. And as I said, climate change doesn't know borders. If countries in Africa and South Asia and the likes of China are pumping out huge amounts of coal, it doesn't matter what we do here. So we all have to work together on this, I think.
Well, don't you think it's slightly hypocritical of us, though, to condemn China for doing that when we are buying things from China, which is one of the reasons why they are so industrialised and producing things for us around the world?
Yeah, and that's why I say it's a very complicated debate. And that exactly is why COP is so important, because we're living in a globalised world. We can't not buy goods from China. China can't completely switch off fossil fuels. Sorry?
Well, we could make some more stuff here, and we could potentially not buy as much from China. I mean, we could,
but we can't.
Very briefly, though,
switch.
Joe Biden's speech. I've got about 30 seconds. How was his speech received?
Overall, I think it was received really well. I mean, it's mainly seen through the lens of a massive contrast to Trump, who pulled out of the Paris Agreement. I think the clip you just showed is exactly it. You know, climate change is about human security and economic security, and President Biden understands that. The US needs to pull its weight more, but overall, positive speech and the right messages.
Well, listen, Andy, thank you very much for joining me and being so succinct at that as well. Andy Williams, the Director of Corporate Affairs at Hume Brophy. Thank you so much. Well, today, I've been asking, can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Marcus says no matter how human he comes across, he was still part of the government that locked us down for no reason whatsoever and flagrantly ignored the rules he set out himself. Robert says, how can neglecting his constituents' money redeem him? Right now, there is a poll up on Twitter throughout the show asking whether Matt Hancock can redeem himself in the eyes of the public. What do you think? Let's see. Well, currently, 24% of you say yes, 76% of you say no. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. Cracky, you're a tough crowd. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Now, coming up in this hour, me and my panel, as ever, taking on those big topics, we'll be discussing lots of things. In Friday Focus, I'm asking why nurses are being paid so poorly and looking at whether it's time to restructure the NHS. And then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we fill labour shortages with migrant workers? All of that after your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. 1 minute past 5. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Ukraine says it's in the final stages of reclaiming the strategic city of Kherson from Russia. Ukrainian soldiers have been celebrating the retreat of Russian troops, waving the national flag in the region's capital. Russia says the withdrawal is complete. Over 30,000 of its soldiers crossed the Dnipro River to the eastern bank this morning, with reports many of them drowned. Despite the retreat, the Kremlin claims Kherson is still part of Russia. UK authorities and coastguards are preparing for a significant surge in small boats crossing the English Channel this weekend. Bad weather has stopped migrants from illegally reaching the coast for almost a fortnight. But GB News understands, with the weather expected to improve, crime groups from Albania are planning a mass launch of small boats from French beaches tomorrow. It would be the first large-scale arrival since the end of last month, when just over 14,000 people arrived in 32 small boats. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is warning there's a tough road ahead after new data shows the UK economy shrank between July and September. It contracted by 0.2% during the 3 months as the cost of living crisis deepened. Hunt says difficult decisions will be needed to restore confidence and economic stability, but that the British economy remains resilient. Last week, the Bank of England forecast a 2-year recession, which would be the longest on record. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has called the latest GDP figures extremely worrying.
Today's GDP numbers are incredibly concerning. They show that the economy has shrunk in the last 3 months, and indeed they show that we are now the only major G7 economy whose economy is still smaller than it was going into the COVID pandemic. So these series of crises are problems made in Downing Street, but it is ordinary working people here in Britain who are paying the price.
The Met Police says 58 people have been charged over the Just Stop Oil protest that shut parts of the M25 this week. Over the last 4 days, environmental activists blocked the motorway, forcing it to close in several places. A police officer was also injured during Wednesday's protests. Earlier today, the group said they will halt their demonstrations on the motorway for now. US President Joe Biden says the war in Ukraine has made it more urgent than ever to double down on climate commitments. Speaking at the COP27 climate summit in Egypt, Biden says he's treating the climate crisis with urgency, adding the US will meet emission reduction targets by 2030. He's called on all countries to act faster on climate change.
Climate crisis is about human security, economic security, environmental security, national security, and the very life of the planet. The United States of America will meet our emissions targets by 2030.
A security guard has admitted to spying for Russia whilst working at the British Embassy in Berlin. David Ballantyne-Smith has pleaded guilty at the Old Bailey to handing over secrets to Moscow. The 58-year-old was arrested by police in August last year after spying for nearly a year. The UK has marked Armistice Day with a 2-minute silence. Bells rang out across the country, including the recently restored Big Ben in London, ahead of the 2-minute silence to remember the war dead. A service was held at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire to pay tribute to all those who've served their country. Army veteran Robert Clark told GB News he'd be remembering all those involved in the armed forces, past and present.
We're incredibly grateful, I think, for the services, the parades, the role of the royal family, for example. This is obviously the first year King Charles is going to be heading the services on Sunday. And I think a lot of the armed forces community and the veterans are welcoming, as well as reflective of the passing of Her late Majesty the Queen, the role that she had with the armed forces.
Heathrow Airport has said it won't be limiting passenger numbers this festive season as it gears up for its biggest Christmas in 3 years. The West London Airport had 50 million passengers pass through its doors so far this year, almost 75% of pre-pandemic levels. Heathrow says a passenger cap won't be needed as a good plan is in place ahead of the Christmas peak. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. There seems to be a backward mentality in the UK. We pay our nurses so badly, they wonder why they leave to provide their services elsewhere or leave the profession altogether. We partially got away with it before Brexit because the pound was strong, a great incentive for those from around the world, but in particular Europe, to deliver their services here. And Brexit has simply highlighted how the NHS has been taking advantage of a foreign mobile workforce which benefited from a strong pound instead of investing in the people in this country. And now, with fewer workers from the EU, British workers are holding the government, which is basically us, to ransom for higher wages to match the real standards of living because they are all we've got And who can blame them? Let me make a few suggestions. Find the money to pay the nurses from the NHS itself. Take it from the upside-down hierarchical NHS bureaucracy, which sees a plethora of net zero and diversity and inclusion managers being paid more than frontline workers. A top-heavy structure of middle managers with loads of committees and no clear structure of accountability. Consolidate the trust to reduce waste so that they can benefit from economies of scale in procurement. And for goodness sake, pay the bursaries so we can make it easy for those who want to get into the nursing profession. There's just one problem. If the government caves into the nurses' demands of around about 15%, then others will follow, and they are already lining up. So here's what else is coming up today. Each Friday at 5, I put the spotlight on a particular guest or subject matter in Friday Focus. And today it's all with regards to the nurses. The Royal College of Nursing has voted to move ahead with strike action after balloting its 300,000 members over a pay dispute. Now, this all comes as record numbers of patients await operations. That's, of course, following the backlog due to the pandemic. I'll be looking into why nurses are being paid so badly and asking whether it's time to restructure the NHS itself. Then, of course, with the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we fill labour shortages with migrant workers? Ardent Brexiteer Lord Simon Wolfson has called upon the Prime Minister to relax Britain's immigration rules to allow foreign workers to fill job vacancies. But with many people voting to leave the EU to limit the influx of foreign labour, the suggestion that has been met with much criticism. So what do you think? Should the UK turn to other countries to fill the labour shortage? Get your views in right now at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So now, of course, it's time for this week's Friday Focus, and for the first time in its 106-year history, the Royal College of Nurses, or the RCN, has voted to move ahead with strike action. That's after it balloted its 300,000 members. Now, the college says that its members have seen pay fall by, in real terms, 20%. That's since 2010, and they're unhappy with the government's offer of a 4.7% pay rise, which is well below inflation. And that, of course, combined with the fact that nurses are badly overstretched due to record nursing vacancies, it's said that have pushed them over the edge. However, if the strike does go ahead, the impact on patients will be immense. That's us, you know. Thousands of operations will have been cancelled and postponed, making the backlog even worse. So for this week's Friday Focus, I'm asking why nurses are being paid so poorly and looking at whether it's time to restructure the NHS. Joining me to talk about this is Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford, Mark Francois. Mark, thank you so much for joining me. Now, the other time we spoke was after you'd been at the Public Accounts Committee and you were discussing all the situation with the top-heavy bureaucracy of the NHS and the way it sort of operates. Do you think it's time now that we need to seriously look at restructuring it?
No, good evening. The first thing I should do, if we're going to talk about pay, is declare an interest, because my wife works as a clinician in the NHS, so I think I should share that. You kindly referred to the Public Accounts Committee hearing that I and others were present at last week. We established during that hearing that about 75% of the entire NHS budget goes on the pay of NHS staff. Mm. And then obviously you've got the operating costs of hospitals, and then you've got the drug bill, and then that leaves relatively little money left, you know, for capital improvements and refurbishment and so on and such like. But I think there'll be a lot of public sympathy, particularly after the way that they performed during the pandemic, you know, for giving nurses a decent pay rise. But I just think, you know, with the current public finances as they are, and ask for up to about, I think it's 17% actually, I think realistically the country just couldn't afford. I think that the question is, what could we realistically afford? And, you know, without then underfunding other critical areas of the NHS as well. But clearly, without well-qualified staff, the whole thing won't work. So somehow we have to strike a balance.
Well, what about the bureaucracy within it, though? The top-heavy structure.
On that point,
the management.
Interestingly, I think the Telegraph revealed in the week that NHS England now has over 400 senior NHS bureaucrats who earn over £100,000 a year, which is a lot. And of those, over 100 earn £150,000 a year or more, which is getting pretty close to what the Prime Minister earns for running the country.
Yeah.
So I think there's a legitimate debate to be had about whether or not the NHS has become, if you like, top heavy in terms of the number of very highly paid managers that you've got. And I think to some degree that is affecting, morale, as it were, at the coalface. And also a lot of, clinical staff will tell you, certainly privately, that, they have to deal with a massive amount of bureaucracy every day just in order to do their job. One described it to me once as a vortex of bureaucracy. So, down the years, governments of both colours have closed a lot of smaller hospitals, what often used to be called cottage hospitals. And there's been a process of centralisation in large, high-tech district general hospitals around the country. This has been a trend for years. And you'll find in most of those district general hospitals, you've now got multiple layers of management sitting above the actual clinical staff. Now, some of those managers, in fairness, do have a clinical background or training, but many of them don't. If you like, they're, quote, civilians. And sometimes the clinical staff feel that those people that run the hospital aren't always properly in touch with some of the pressures that they as clinical staff face day to day. So if we're going to put more money into the health service, and remember at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money we're talking about, there's no magic money tree, then I think we do need to look very carefully at how effectively that money is spent. I think my constituents don't resent paying taxes to fund the NHS, but quite rightly, they want value for money. And I'm sure that's the same, for taxpayers all over the country. So again, we've got to get the balance right.
I think that's it, really. I mean, they're wasting so much money. Stay right there, Mark. Also joining me is a psychiatric nurse, Julia Taylor. Julie, thank you so much for joining. It's good to talk to you again. Right, so the nurses, I think they're underpaid. Why do you think, though, that they're underpaid? Because it just seems a bit ridiculous that we have a system where people at the coalface doing the real nitty-gritty aren't really being paid as much as the people who are just restructuring and pushing paper about. I appreciate that some of them are needed, but surely a lot of them can go.
You know what? I think we're so badly paid, Nana, because we're taken for granted, because for most of it, it's a vocation, not a job, and it's kind of used against us by government, not the government, in power. And there's a general misconception that because nurses care so much that they're just going to accept any pay and they'll do it just to do the job that they love. And 89% of NHS nurses are female. Is that another reason? Is that something we need to talk about? I don't know. But at the risk of sounding like a raging feminist, which I'm not really, it's just a question that makes me think, how come if there was loads of men there, 89% men, would it still be the same, I wonder? You know where I'm coming from when I say that? Yeah.
I think you make a valid point, actually. It's something that I hadn't really thought about. But in general, I mean, we've seen that women often get paid a lot less than the men in doing the same role. What do you think, then, in terms of, I mean, you're not going, or are you going on strike as well, or are you drawn into the strike, or you're not?
No, I'm not. I didn't vote initially, but because I'm in unison, I've got until the 24th of November. But Danny Kelly made me feel 1,000 shames last week, so I've asked for my ballot paper to be resent, and I'm going to send it saying no.
Danny Kelly's here. You can.
What did you say?
Well,
what did you say?
First of all, I want to pay tribute to that lady in Middlesbrough. She does a fabulous job here. My point with Julie last week was that she should have made her feelings known on the ballot box. So what Julie did last week, she just didn't fill it out and send it back. And I said that if it was me, I'd have made my feelings known. And I'm sorry to make you feel embarrassed, Julie. That was never my intention, because I think you do a wonderful job. And I'm glad, if you like, that you and I have found common ground with this.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Oh, good. Good, I'm glad you found common ground. I'm glad he was there to speak, to talk to you. Can I bring Mark back into this as well? Because Mark Francois is also there. Mark, now I know you said that you declared an interest that your partner, your wife works with the NHS as well. You know, the feelings of Julie, that Julie has, are they sort of, in your view, kind of a common shared view for most of the nurses who are potentially going to go on strike?
Well, from what I hear, I'm sure what Julie has said is not unrepresentative. So you know, I think if you stop 100 people walking down a high street and say, do you think nurses should be given a good pay rise? You know, 98 of those people are going to say yes. The nub of it comes how you then manage to afford to do it without taking money away from other areas of the NHS as well. So I think we need, you know, do we need to put more money into the NHS? Well, I think we've been putting billions and billions more in for years. You know, some of that has gone into pay for nurses and doctors and other clinicians, which I think is a good thing. But we also need to look at how much of that money has ended up, you know, being spent on bureaucracy that perhaps we could do with less of. So I think there are very legitimate demands from people at the coalface for more money for clinical staff. And I think the point I'm trying to make is that we need to see if we've got the balance right between what we're paying the clinical staff, who are actually dealing with the patients on a day-to-day basis, and the very senior managers who aren't. So I think, you know, we need to look at that balance again and see if we got it the right way round.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Mark. And Julie, I'll give the last word to you then. In terms of the pay, and obviously I don't believe the nurses are paid well. I think they should be paid more. I'm concerned with regard to a strike as to how it will affect everyday people, because obviously that's what will be the problem. Do you think that perhaps if we could find some more of that money through cutting down the bureaucracy, do you think that's one of the things that we seriously need to be looking at?
I think that would probably work and go some way to help. But one of the main things I'd like Mark to have a think about here is we pay $423 million a year to agency staff because there's not enough nurses, because we can't recruit nurses. We've lost 25,000 nurses just in the last year. Can't we use that money instead? Just up the wages and don't use agency? Is that not something we could consider?
Well, I'll give Mark a chance to reply to that. What do you think? Very briefly, Mark, you've got about 30 seconds.
Well, there's definitely been a trend where, if you like, full-time staff have been going part-time and then working through agencies. And, of course, when they do that, which is entirely their choice, what that does is it tends to increase the pressure on the full-time staff who remain. So I think we do need to look at that balance between full-time staff and part-time staff. Sometimes people go part-time for family reasons because of family commitments, which is completely understandable. But again, if you get the balance wrong, as I think Julie is indicating, what you end up with is too many full-time staff leave, become part-time, and then you then get into a bit of a spiral where you increase the pressure on the full-time staff, and some of them think, I've had enough of this, and then they leave, and it gets worse and worse. The NHS England has been working for a long while on a new NHS workforce plan, which is meant to address this challenge. Everyone's been waiting for this, but again, as it came out at the PAC, they still haven't finished it.
Haven't done it.
They're hoping to finish it by Christmas, and ministers haven't even got it yet. So the quicker the bureaucrats get on with the workforce plan, the better, and hopefully there'll be stuff in there that will persuade Julie's colleagues not to leave the profession.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope. Julia Taylor, thank you very much for joining me, and also Mark Francois, MP. Thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you both. Right, well, coming up, it's the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should we fill labour shortages with migrant workers? Ardent Brexiteer Lord Simon Wolfson has called upon the Prime Minister to relax Britain's immigration rules to allow foreign workers to fill the vacancies. But what do you think? Should we turn to other countries to fill those shortages? That's on the way after the break.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
So it's coming up to 24 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And don't forget to download the GB News app, or you can stream us live on YouTube. You can catch up with the programme there as well. Now, it is time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we fill the labour shortage with migrant workers? The Brexit-supporting chief executive of Next called on Rishi Sunak, he's Lord Wilson, called on the Prime Minister to relax immigration rules and allow more foreign workers into Britain to alleviate chronic labour shortages. The Conservative peer said that the current restrictions on immigration were damaging growth and were definitely not the Brexit that he wanted. But he added that companies wanting to employ foreign workers should pay a 10% tax on their salaries to encourage them to recruit from Britain first. But with many people voting to leave the EU to limit the influx of foreign labour, his calls have been met with much criticism. Even Ukrainian refugees who left their war-torn country to build a better life here in the UK have gone back to Ukraine due to the cost of living crisis and poor working conditions. Yes, exactly. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we fill labour shortages with migrant workers? I'm joined now by the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe. Stephen, first of all, I want to ask you whether you agree with your fellow Brexiteer, Lord Wilson, that we need to relax immigration rules and to alleviate the British labour market.
Well, we already have a reasonably relaxed immigration system for those who are coming in at the high end, or what you call the high earners, which actually is just over £35,000 a year. So companies have really invested by bringing people in from abroad. And we've actually seen an increase in the numbers of people who are foreign immigrants working here. The argument, though, for Lord Wolson and for those who like to indulge in the idea that a British economy should continue to be a low-wage, low-investment, low-growth, low-education economy is let's bring in cheap labour from abroad, because we cannot persuade the government to make the effective changes which are necessary to improve productivity and the profitability of companies. And let me give you an example. For example, businesses in the pub trade, I know one particularly here in Winchester, has seen massive rises in electricity and gas prices. And rather than deal with the price gouging from BP and the energy companies and taking that money from them and giving it to those small businesses who could then pass it on in higher wages, no, what do? We decide that we want to have low wages to perpetuate that low wage economy. And those people who are earning £10 or £11 an hour in a pub cannot live in Winchester, cannot live in the surrounding areas, and have to commute in from miles away. And that's the same scenario all across the country.
Yeah, but then he also pointed out that things like crops are rotting in fields because there aren't any people to pick them. Some warehouses are barely operable because there aren't enough people to run them. He's saying that right now something needs to be done.
Well, let me take this as an example. 2 years ago, when this argument about crops rotting in the fields came up, I made an application for a couple of farms, and they came back and said that you're going to be earning around £9.50 working from 7 in the morning till 6 at night. Well, quite frankly, again, living in those areas, these are unpalatable wages in today's economy. What we should be seeing is people earning £20 an hour. But how do you achieve that without putting those businesses out of kilter? You don't raise income tax. You don't raise capital gains tax. You reduce business rates. You remove them completely. But there are two further points that we really need to consider. One is the selfishness of people like Lord Wolfson and those who want to bring people into this country from abroad. It's a form of reverse colonialism, as I was once told by an African ambassador, who said that we spend money training our own nurses and doctors to improve our own health services, only to see the NHS send out their teams to take our nurses at higher wages in the UK. So whether you're from the Philippines, whether you're from other countries, we are acting as colonialists by stealing wages and individuals with talent from their countries to fill our gaps because we won't invest.
Well, stay right there, Stephen, because I'm going to have a chat with Andy. He's a bar owner, Andy Jones. He's saying, well, what Stephen was saying there was in a sense that some people who are looking for these cheap employees are actually quite selfish in a sense. Andy, what do you think with regard to your own business? Because you're, I understand, suffering with this labour shortage and it's affecting you.
Absolutely. I employ between 40 and 50 people. I have about 5 or 6 gaps that I need to fill. And to be completely honest, in the past couple of years, it's been an absolute disaster just getting people to come in for an interview. We can't pay what we'd like to pay people in the hospitality industry. Our business rates are massive, as it's just been touched on. Paying people £11, £12 an hour in London is unfeasible for them to have a decent life away from work. Something's got to give. People need to come back into this country to fill this labour shortage, because I don't know where this is going to end. The hospitality industry is in dire straits. Rents in London are massive. Business rates in London are massive. We cannot fill the gaps that COVID left, the gaps that Brexit left, to get to a solid working platform.
But surely getting the foreign workers in will perpetuate your agony, because then, of course, the government won't bring down business rates because they'll think, well, you've got cheap labour force in there and all the things that you need to make effective. Does Stephen have a really good point there? Is that he's saying that rather than bring in foreign workers, surely the emphasis should be on looking at the government and saying reduce business rates, do those things so that you can then effectively pay your staff properly?
We would love to be able to pay our staff more. And it comes down to 3 key factors. On food-led businesses, there should be a reduction in VAT. Down to 10% is the proposal. I should say that there's a big hospitality demo taking place in London on Monday, and they want 10% VAT, a reduction in business rates holiday, or complete scrapping of business rates, and the allowance of European workers to come back and work in the hospitality industry, because it's dying. The hospitality industry, especially in London, is dying. There are places closing every single day. I'd love to pay people more. I'd love to pay people 18, 19, £20 an hour. It's simply not feasible.
Yeah, well, you said it's not feasible, but then I think you allude to Stephen's point that actually the reality is that, you need to pay people more to get them into the jobs, and there should be investing actually in the workforce within this country. But then you're still calling for workers from abroad. I mean, that's what you're saying, right?
Because there has to be some give. The hospitality industry is one of those things that it's still a fallback industry for so many people. It's hard to get people in their prime, in their 20s, in their early 30s to commit to a life of work in hospitality. A lot of people have bigger goals. A lot of people fall into hospitality and go on to have wonderful careers. That's exactly what I did. I grew up in it. I left it. I came back to it, and I've got businesses now that can relatively prosper. But it's hard to get people in their prime, university educated, people that want to go and do other things, to come and work in hospitality, wait tables, pull pints. It's really hard to do that.
On this, Well, Stephen, that's what he's saying, that actually it's hard to get people in there. So, irrespective of what's happening in the labour force and the wages.
Well, Andy's identified the first key point is that the biggest cost to increasing labour wages is the cost that governments are placing upon those businesses, as well as the additional inflationary costs that we've got as well through energy. So if you did that, you'd end up increasing wages. And why is that important? I'll give you an example for me. I've recently worked part-time in my local pub, and they're paying £9.80 an hour plus tips on there. That is not enough for me to sustain a life in Winchester, looking after my daughter as a single father. But I know that pub is under an enormous pressure because of the raises in the cost of energy, the business rates. So the government should be helping the industry the other way around. There are people in their 50s like me, 1.5 million, who's left the marketplace, who would love to come back to work, but only if they get decent wages. And that's up to the government. Reduce VAT to 0 for businesses such as Andy's, to ensure that you have no business rates for at least a year whilst we're going through this pandemic issue, to ensure that the energy companies are taking their money back and making the energy costs, which I'm sure Andy will tell you, I bet he's at about a 400% increase in his electricity gas costs.
Well, can I just ask you then?
That's nothing to do with immigration, it's all to do with government costings.
Well, the last word to you, and very briefly then, Andy, if those things that Stephen has suggested were in place, would you then look to, rather than ask, say, you want more people from abroad to come and work, would you then agree that actually we should be looking for people in this country?
We should be looking for people from our country, but we shouldn't limit it to looking at people from our country. I agree with everything that's just been said. The food-led businesses are getting absolutely pasted. The energy costs are huge. The rent in London, my rent is 130,000 a year. My business rate's at 48,000. It's insane. It's such a large amount of money, and then you've got 50 staff to pay on top of that. It's You wait until, and can I just touch on one point with the government helping out? Very quickly. The furlough money that was given to staff, amazing initiative, okay? The businesses had to pick up the PAYE bill. We were closed for months and months and months, and I had a £9,000 a month PAYE bill.
Wow.
That is insane.
It is insane, Andy. We appreciate your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Andy Jones. He's a bar manager. And also thank you so much to Stephen Wolf as well. Really good to talk to you both. Good to talk to you. Okay. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, our Great British Debate. I'm asking all this with regards to the thoughts of immigration. What do you think? That's on the way after your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5:34. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Video footage has emerged showing the main bridge from the strategic Ukrainian city of Kherson over the Dnipro River having been destroyed. The Antonivsky Bridge is the only nearby crossing from the city of Kherson to the Russian-controlled eastern bank of the Dnipro River. Well, it comes as Ukraine says it's in the final stages of reclaiming Kherson from Russia. Ukrainian soldiers have been celebrating the retreat of Russian troops, waving the national flag in the region's capital. Russian soldiers crossed the river to the eastern bank this morning, with reports many of them drowned. Despite the retreat, the Kremlin claims Kherson is still part of Russia. UK authorities and coastguards are preparing for a significant surge in small boat crossings in the English Channel this weekend. GB News has seen evidence of up to 6,000 migrants waiting to cross near the northern coast of France. With the weather improving, we understand crime groups from Albania are planning a mass launch of small boats from tomorrow. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt's warning there's a tough road ahead, saying difficult decisions will be needed to restore confidence and economic stability. His comments come as the latest official figures show the UK economy contracted by 0.2% between July and September. The data from the Office for National Statistics follows the Bank of England's warning last week that the UK may be heading for a 2-year recession. And the Metropolitan Police says 58 people have been charged over the Just Stop Oil protest that shut parts of the M25 this week. Over the last 4 days, environmental activists blocked the motorway, forcing it to close in several places. A police officer was also injured during Wednesday's protest. Earlier today, the group said they will halt their demonstrations on the motorway for now. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's coming up to 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. Welcome on board. If you've just tuned in, where on earth have you been? This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now let's return to our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we fill the labour shortages with migrant workers? Lord Wolfson has urged the government to relax Britain's immigration rules and allow more foreign workers into the country to alleviate chronic labour shortages. The Brexit-supporting Conservative peers said that the current restrictions on immigration were damaging growth and were definitely not the Brexit that he wanted. But he added that measures should be put in place to ensure that businesses prioritise hiring British workers. But with so many people voting to leave the EU to limit the influx of foreign labour, his calls have been met with a lot of criticism. So what's your view? In the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we fill labour shortages with migrant workers? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Christine Hamilton and also Danny Kelly. All right, so Danny, we'll come to you. Shortage of migrant workers, shortage of workers in this country. Do you think that we should actually replace it?
Well, why not? We're a sovereign nation. We can decide who and when they come through our borders. One thing about Brexit, I'm going to speak generally.
You say that, but we've got lots of people coming across the channel. We're not able to do that.
No, that's correct, yeah. I'm going to speak very generally here. I think that if people voted Brexit because of unfettered immigration, I think that they would accept if we are short. I don't think everyone was xenophobic or racist and they just hated Southern Europeans and Eastern Europe. I don't think that for 1 second, probably a few. And I think if you could have a rational conversation, say, look, we're short of skilled staff, and that Andy Jones, gentleman from London, he needs people to wait tables and pull pints. When I was 17, I'm a Scouser by birth. When I was I am. When I was 17,
doesn't show.
Broadway.
You don't even sound it.
Broadway in Worcestershire, there's a hotel called the Ligon Arms, and they couldn't get anyone to work there. So what they did, they advertised in northern cities, in the Liverpool Echo, the Sheffield Star, the Newcastle Chronicle, and they couldn't get staff to fill those roles. So all of a sudden there was an influx of Scousers, Manx, Geordies, Yorkshire people, because it's always been the case that catering is not a relatively popular future for Brits.
Get to the point.
Well, that's my point. For Brits, I don't think British
Is that all
kids
you have
want
to say at the end?
to serve pints.
I thought there was some really great story. It comes out.
I got sacked there, if that's of any interest.
You got sacked. That was more like it. I'm not surprised. What, for eating all the food?
So I think it's an unpopular career, generally speaking.
Well, if you'd been paid more, you might have liked it, Christine.
Well, what I don't understand is why in the same towns we've got mass vacancies and we've got mass unemployment. And, for example, in Birmingham, Glasgow, Liverpool, we have 20% of the working age population, 20%, that's getting on for a quarter, are on out-of-work benefits. They're the working age population. Why are they on out-of-work benefits? Seems to me extraordinary. In Middlesbrough, apparently, 23%. We've got to get our own people back to work, and COVID didn't help. An awful lot of people, especially in their kind of 50s, who were coming up to retirement. Retirement was too attractive, and they got used to sort of not working and staying at home. But to go back to Lord Wolfson, apparently he is offering in his warehouse, Next warehouse, £9.80 an hour, which is 30p above the minimum wage. You have to do that. You're in the warehouse, so it's quite hard work, you know, humping stuff and everything. You've got to start at 5 o'clock. You've got to, in the morning, you've got to have your own transport. In the same town, this is Rotherham, you can get £10 an hour to pack online orders in Asda, or you can get £12.64 as a shop assistant. So I think maybe he should perhaps offer a little bit more, and he might attract some British workers. But I think our big problem is getting British people who are working age and who have somehow dropped out. Obviously, some of them are ill, and the awful thing is that some of them will be on waiting lists and they can't work until we get all that moved. But we've got visa systems. We've got a health and care visa system. We've got a skilled worker visa system, a seasonal workers visa system. So nobody objects to immigrants coming in with visas in the proper way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree that you should have a level where you would take people on. But in a place where you have lots of people who are not working, and there is an opportunity for lots of British people to be working, it seems absurd that they should be that you should have this situation. There has to be a way, and I think that what you have said with regard to Asda, who paid £10.10, and of course was it Next paying £9.80. It's all about the money. It's all about. If they pay more money, then people will do the jobs. I don't understand why they're just being myopic and ridiculous. Somebody said to me, "Look, I tell you what, I'll pay you £15 an hour. We normally pay 8. I'll give you 15. Then if you look at it and I was on benefits and it would literally triple my benefits, I'm off. I'll do the job." They're not being honest. They're not
too many people.
And they want to try and. I think there's almost like a sort of like an overall sort of push by lots of big companies and big business who want us to go back to that situation where we had
really
low
labor.
wages, cheap labour, and this is part of the whole emphasis to make us think, oh, we really must do. No. Pay people more money. Pay them more. Pay people more, they will do the jobs.
Yeah, but I don't think it is being short-sighted, because if you pay people more, that is going to go on the end result for the customer. Now, in my game...
Well, no, because some of them are giving huge dividends to shareholders. It's not true. They could do differently.
OK, but if you ask any... Generally speaking, OK, forgive me for talking over you, but if you ask any business person, can I add another 20% onto the salary of a staff, then the end user, whether it's someone who's receiving a parcel through DPS or whatever they're called, they're the ones that are going to have to pay for that. And margins have been cut down so much.
Yes, that might happen, but this is a competition. This is a competitive environment. So just like people shop around for the best deal in terms of work and wages, people will shop around for the best deal in terms of products. So those manufacturers have to get with the programme and start... They were basically drunk on cheap labour, cheap goods from China, and now it's coming to a head where people are saying, no, we're not going to do the job. And the immigrants won't come here because the pound is not doing that well. Why would somebody come from Europe and get an equal pound with
I can answer that question for you.
They won't. Christine, just let...
Well, you answer that question, because
Britain is a great place to be a young person.
No, that's not good enough.
No, that's true.
No, it's not good enough.
Well, it may not be good enough, but it's true.
It's only you saying it.
I think, given that Lord Wilson is head of Next, I think we've become drunk on cheap fashion.
Yeah.
And I think that some of the stuff that people expect to pay, or the small amount of money they expect to pay for, whether it's a coat or a dress or a pair of shoes, is utterly ludicrous. We're either exploiting people in this country, but normally we're exploiting people abroad. And I think if we can somehow get rid of this throwaway fashion, that has got into everybody's head. It's ridiculous. I mean, some young people, you wear something 5 times and that's it. You can't be seen in it again.
No.
It's a nonsense.
That's me, darling.
But
I don't buy... I try and buy something... some of the things I wear are like 30 years old.
Nana,
seriously.
I wouldn't underestimate how brilliant the UK is for young people.
No, I'm not saying that. But
they're not coming for salaries. They're coming to experience this great country.
Yes, they might do, but they're not going to stay if they're just doing that. It's kind of like a holiday, frankly. And when it comes to the real world, when it comes to working, and they're looking for an income, those from the EU will not come here, frankly, because the pound is equal now to the euro. Before, it was a lot higher, so they could work here and do better and take the money back there.
And we've lost... During and since the pandemic, we've lost 320,000 workers from the economy. They're sitting at home for whatever reason. These are people of working age. That's a city the size of Bristol that's dropped out of the economy. That's what we've got to try and deal with.
Well, also, we can push the wages up because a lot of those people that you've pointed out are sitting at home. Right, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices. Your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. And there's 4 of you. Excellent, wonderful. Right, let's start with Miranda Richardson. Not the Miranda Richardson, but this one from Northamptonshire. Miranda, I do it every time.
Afternoon. Afternoon, Nana, you okay?
Yeah, good, thank you, Miranda. I hope you're well. Talk to me. What do you think about this? Cheap labour.
I'm good. So, obviously, I work in hospitality. I run a pub. That's what I do. And I pay over minimum wage. I have to get good staff, to get decent staff. The problem I've got is that the ones that want to come to work don't necessarily want to work a weekend, don't want to work late on a Friday night, don't want to work late on a Saturday. Oh, I quite like Sunday lunch. What are we to do? What are we to do? You know, we are paying over the odds. We are doing that because we know we want to encourage great workers. But actually, we've got a little bit of a culture here in Britain where they don't... I quite like to work between the hours of 10 and 2 and have every other weekend off.
Yeah, I know.
Wouldn't we all? And this is what we're up against. We can pay them all the money. We pay them all the money they want, but actually, that's not the issue. It's actually getting them to do the job.
Getting them to do the job. There has been a rumour that is partly the point and case. Julie Ford in Bedfordshire, what's your view on this?
Hi, Nana. Thanks for having me on. I mean, I've agreed really with everything that's been said by everybody that you've had on this debate so far in varying degrees. And for me, I think it goes back to what Miranda's just said. It's a change of mentality. You know, when I first left school and went out to work, it was a bar job. And, I didn't think I was going to stay in hospitality all my life. I didn't see it as a career. It didn't have, for me, prospects. And I wonder if that's the problem. We've got too many people now who, when they get into the workforce, it's a case of it's got to fit into their lifestyle, where work shouldn't have to fit into your lifestyle. Work is there, what you do to create a lifestyle for yourself. And bringing migrants in, I think, is probably the only solution that we have now. Because we have created this society that is not going to go out there and work. We don't have skill anymore.
You mean we've got work-shy wallflowers? Right, let's go to Dr. Seshni Muglia in Milton Keynes. Seshni, you've got 30 seconds, Seshni.
Good evening, Nana. Thank you for having me on. I agree with what most of your panelists have said, and I do think that we do need migrant labour because of the current shortages of staff, because of Brexit, and also because of the post-pandemic. It's clear that we are currently going through a crisis, and in order for British economy to recover, we do need immigrant labour.
OK, thank you for that. Nicely done. And Brian Dugan there in Solihull. Brian, last word to you. You've got 30 seconds as well. Poor Brian.
Nana, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. Pay people, and then we have to incentivise the likes of Miranda in order to be able to pay people. But we have to be sensible as well. We have to reconcile what was voted for by a majority of the country in terms of Brexit with being sensible and moving forward in the best way and what is in the best interests of the country. So I think there's a balance to be struck, if you like, between both sides. But I think in terms of let's be sensible about it. Of course, we can have migrant workers, but if we can have British people doing the jobs in the first place, well, maybe we wouldn't have the labour shortage.
Yeah, good point. Thank you very much to all my great British voices. Seshni Muglia in Milton Keynes, Julie Ford in Bedfordshire, Miranda Richardson in Northamptonshire, and of course Brian Dugan in Solihull. Lovely to talk to you all. Thank you. Right, so today I've been asking, should we fill labour shortages with migrant workers? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. Matthew says better to get our own unemployed off benefits and into work. Absolutely, hear. Michael says there are enough people in the country in need of jobs. Brian says yes, but obviously only the legal ones. Very good indeed, I love it. Well, keep your thoughts coming, but very briefly, a story that caught my eye. A Geordie conman has been spared jail after he was caught with a sock full of counterfeit 20-pound notes. William Hickson's £820 wad of cash appeared to be genuine at first glance, but upon closer inspection, pictures of the money show the wording £20 has been substituted with the Geordie slang 20 pound. P-O-O-N-D. Oh, dear.
Full marks for effort.
Well, look, what a jackass.
Is this the worst combat in history?
What a dope, what a doofus. It's a great story.
Unbelievable.
I mean, the thing is, the notes look quite authentic until you read how they spelt poons. What a dope.
What a dope. Right, for our second quick-fire debate, the Royal Opera household has banned for life a heckler who booed a child actor during a new production of Handel's Alcina. Now, on the opening night of the show, 12-year-old Malachi Bayo stepped forward to begin singing an aria, and then when he was interrupted by booing from one man in the audience who shouted, "Rubbish!" It's not funny.
Not funny.
We're all laughing.
It is funny.
No.
The Royal Opera House has responded by banning the heckler for life for what they called his appalling behaviour. A punishment classical experts cannot recall being meted out in recent history of the institution. Christine, was that a proportional response?
Absolutely. Pour encourager les autres. We should do exactly the same sort of thing with these climate change activists who are blocking the M25. Something absolutely sensational which will discourage others from following suit.
Look, if he was garbage, he was garbage. And here's a short, sharp
Not the
shock.
point. He was a 12-year-old
Here's
child.
a short, sharp shock to what life is really like.
12-year-old child.
Daniel Radcliffe was the world's worst child actor. The only reason he got the gig as Harry Potter is because he looked like Harry Potter. Terrible actor. And unfortunately, the sooner you learn that life ain't fair, the tougher you are.
Yeah, well, that heckler has now learnt it.
Well, they shouldn't have banned him. They should have given him a front row season ticket.
No. Absolute rubbish. No.
That poor child, though.
Poor child, he was 12. People go to the Royal Opera House. People will have paid a fortune for those tickets, and they do not need
He may have
somebody
been like a
rubbish.
howling banshee. You just don't know.
That's not the point.
Well, it might be
He'd
the
only
point.
just got going.
Right, and finally, British Airways has become the latest company to jump on the gender-neutral bandwagon after announcing that male pilots and cabin crew can wear makeup and carry handbags regardless of their gender identity. In what is a significant relaxation of the airline's strict uniform rules, staff are reportedly told to be bold, be proud, be yourself. An internal memo. And British Airways said that it hopes that the refreshed guidance would be embraced by everyone regardless of gender identity, ethnicity, background, cultural, sexual identity or otherwise. Danny, what do you think?
So long as the woman with the penis can land the plane, I'm fine.
Christine.
Hang on, I'm just trying to work that one out. Look, it's the world we live in, isn't it? If a male pilot wants to wear makeup and earrings and a tiny little mini skirt, if he's got nice legs, what can we do about it? Nothing.
I don't care what they're wearing. I can't be bothered as long
as they can land properly.
As long as they serve me drinks. Right, well, on Stage Show, we've been asking, can Matt Hancock redeem himself in the eyes of the public? And according to our Twitter poll, 26% of you say yes. 74% of you say, no way, Jose. Thank you so much to my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly for joining me today.
Thank you.
Do make sure, sorry, there wasn't really room for you to speak in that bit. Will you? Right,
consider yourself told off.
Be quiet, shut up.
Headmistress.
Right, make sure you tune in tomorrow because I'm going to be joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. And also GB News presenter Calvin Robinson. Next up, it's Dubes and Co with Michelle. So, Michelle, what is on the way?
Hello. First and foremost, look at us. We're both dressed very similar tonight, aren't we? Hot pink is the colour it seems to be of this season. Nanny got good taste. Anyway, coming up on my show tonight, 2.5 million people of working age are classed as economically inactive. What is going on? What do we do about it? We need all the workers we can get. And social care. How on earth are we going to pay for it? Whose responsibility should it be to look after us when we're old or in need of care? Should it be the state's? Or should it be our estates, our own wealth? And, you know, Remembrance Sunday this weekend, councils have been cancelling their parades, though, because of cost cutting. Really? I don't think that's ever appropriate. Do you?
Well, looking forward to that on the way. Thank you so much, Michelle. And a huge thank you to you at home for taking part. Thank you so much. I'll be back tomorrow at 4. Jubes & Co. is next. I'll leave you with the weather. Enjoy.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The mild weather continues throughout this weekend. The winds should be lighter tomorrow, and that will allow some fog to form overnight. Still very gusty out there through the rest of today. The isobars are really close together. This weather front is slowly sinking south. It's made for a very wet couple of days across the Highlands and the Western Isles of Scotland, but it is easing off now, bringing some lighter rain to southern Scotland and actually the far north of England too. That rain then likely to push back north into parts of Northern Ireland, back across southern Scotland during the early hours. Most of England and Wales stay dry. The winds ease off a touch. It will be a little cooler than last night, certainly in northern Scotland, but still pretty mild. And it is going to turn misty, murky, some fog around on Saturday morning, mostly across central and eastern England. That should gradually clear, but it may take a while. The rain will be petering out from Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, eventually pushing up across northern Scotland, but not as heavy as the past couple of days. So many places brightening up during tomorrow, and it is going to be mild, even where it stays glum across parts of northeast England, 13, 14, but with a bit of sunshine, 16, 17, maybe 18 degrees Celsius. Temperatures will drop through Saturday evening, but generally staying fairly mild. The rain petering out finally across northern Scotland. So most will be dry as we go through Saturday night. Again, some fog likely, and again, most likely over central and eastern parts of England, where it could be quite dense, and at this time of year, it can take quite a long time to clear. So for some, it may stay a bit drab and a bit grey on Sunday. Later on, some rain will trickle into the west of Northern Ireland, but most places, again, on Sunday should be dry, brightening up with some sunny spells. And yet again, it really won't feel like November with temperatures pretty high for the time of year.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories,